Hello and welcome. For 20 months, Gaza has been devastated. Over 57,000 Palestinians killed, neighborhoods destroyed, and children starving due to an 11-week blockade blocking aid. The UN warns famine is imminent. Amid this crisis, a diplomatic opening emerges. In Washington, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu meets President Trump with a draft 60-day ceasefire that would exchange Israeli detainees for Palestinian prisoners and allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. Hamas, negotiating from Istanbul and Doha, is reviewing the offer and may respond soon. Israeli officials say a truce could begin next week if Hamas agrees. However, the deal faces internal Israeli opposition from far-right ministers, threatening coalition collapse, while opposition leader Yair Lapid supports maintaining government stability to pursue peace. Public opinion in Israel favors ending the war, though hawks push for West Bank annexation. The key question remains whether the ceasefire can survive Israel's political divisions and prevent Gaza's descent into starvation. All this in our special coverage today. Palestinians in Gaza are mourning victims killed in Israeli airstrikes. They gathered in Gaza's Qnews today to bid farewell to relatives killed by Israeli fire. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, some killed overnight in airstrikes, while others were shot while seeking aid. Meanwhile, President Trump said it would likely be known within 24 hours whether Hamas will accept a final proposal, as he called it, for a Gaza ceasefire. Trump previously said Israel had agreed to a 60-day truce aimed at ending the conflict. Gaza's health ministry reports many killed, over 57,000, since Israel launched its offensive following Hamas's October 2023 attack. An Israeli airstrike on a Gaza City school sheltering many kills at least 15 Palestinians, most of them women and children. They were killed yesterday when the Israeli airstrike targeted the Mustafa Hafez school, which had been converted into a shelter in Gaza City's Al Ramal neighborhood. Locals say most of the victims belonged local sources, say most of the victims belonged to one grieving mother. Sabiha Alakan described his son as bright as the moon. She also added that his body had been burned beyond recognition. Another strike on a shelter in eastern Gaza City reportedly killed 16 people as Israeli attacks continue across the Strip. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Ahmed Sultan, a researcher in regional security and terrorism, joining us from Cairo. Thanks for being here with us on Qnews. Now, how do you view the upcoming talks between Netanyahu and Trump in Washington?
We are hearing about ceasefire agreement and the Gaza Strip. There are negotiations and talks regarding a partial agreement, and there are several factors interlinked with this partial agreement, and we expect reaching an understanding. The Palestinian factions, on top of which Hamas movement, want U.S. guarantees for full cessation of hostilities after the exchange deal. And for the Israeli side and U.S. side, there is a desire to have a partial deal only to release the detainees, and after that, the hostilities may resume, because the current visions by the Israeli leaders for the future of the Gaza Strip are focusing on controlling the Gaza Strip once again and occupying a larger portion of the Strip in addition to the West Bank and annexing them officially to Israel. Israel wants to expand. And this was indicated by Trump when he said that Israel is a small country in terms of area and they need to expand, whether by force. And it is happening now. We have seen this in different wars. We have seen it between Russia and Ukraine, and now it's taking place in the Gaza Strip and definitely in the West Bank. The talks are very important, and the US role is the thing making a difference towards a real deal, especially with the adamant Israeli officials not to have a deal. But we cannot say that there will be a comprehensive deal. This deal can very easily be violated, and we might not move to sustainability of this agreement.
Okay, and how do you view the Israeli political pressures, and how do they, including of course the opposition within Netanyahu's own coalition, and how might they complicate the implementation of any ceasefire?
For the opposition in Israel, there is the opposition against Netanyahu, represented in a group of political parties led by Eyab Lviv, and there is opposition inside Netanyahu's coalition himself, represented in Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the Minister of Financial Affairs. This is the same with what we talked about. The Israeli leadership does not want to withdraw completely from the Gaza Strip. It's an opportunity for the far-right Israeli party to claim new lands and control it. And the Palestinians can be confined in small regions. These regions are simply what's gonna be left of the Gaza Strip, and the displacement scheme will be implemented by evacuating tens of thousands from the Gaza Strip. That will be sufficient for Israel at the moment, and of course destroying all infrastructure and life components in the Strip to pressure the Palestinians to leave. And we also taken into consideration the pressures practiced by Israel in the reconstruction issue, which is so far going nowhere. Israel is exerting enough efforts not to stop the war, and the Yair Lapid parties are weaker and have less influence to change the course. Netanyahu, as a politician, was able to take advantage of October 7th attacks to have this pride of what Israel did on October 8th. And of course, the conditions in the Gaza Strip and the Israeli-Iranian war. Netanyahu has been very lucky, and he is very popular in spite of all opposition, and he is aware that the open-ended war is not a solution, and that's why he's now working on a solution that might satisfy the Israeli public.
As you mentioned there, Israel does not want to fully withdraw from the Gaza Strip. Hamas is demanding a complete end to the war. Is this going to be a major sticking point, a major problem when it comes to any agreement?
Definitely, this is going to be a sticking point, and this led to the deterioration of past talks. What happened in last March? What happened that there were talks and we reached an exchange deal, and this was supposed to take place indirectly to reach a sustainable ceasefire, but the Israeli occupation resumed the war because the political leadership refused any potential of a full ceasefire agreement. The Palestinian factions actually overcame the Daytonese card, the military depletion. So far, this is pressuring the military leadership in Israel, because the Israeli ability to bear these casualties is still acceptable for the military leadership and the political leadership. The facts on the ground are setting the course, because in natural events, the military situation is the one leading the political stance, but now the political stance is leading the military facts, and for an entity like Israel, they are always submitted to the political leadership. It's a sticking point that might blow off any potential for a deal, as I always describe Hamas as they brought this war on themselves and they have no pressuring cards to negotiate. Now Israel does not pay a lot of attention to the Daytonese and in the Gaza operations in Gaza eliminated more people than the total number of the detainees, and war itself is a tool of politics.
So are there any security guarantees or enforcement mechanisms that can be put in place to convince Israel and Hamas to commit to this ceasefire, do you think?
For Hamas, they have a real desire to reach a true ceasefire agreement and to end the state of war. Hamas was completely undermined already. Hamas went back 40 years, and this is completely known for Israel. Hamas wants a ceasefire as soon as possible because the internal front itself is now pressuring the resistance and pressuring Hamas. There is a desire to stop the war, but what are the guarantees? This is the problem. The Israeli side are aware that they are moving from a position of strength. They are basing their negotiations on their military accomplishments. They are able to change the scene, the features of the scenes in the entire region, including the Gaza Strip. And therefore, with the cooperation of the United States, they are not investing that much in the second day following the war plan. This needs some Arab collaboration to disarm the Palestinian factions, and there might be some kind of consensus over these demands. Hamas itself now does not want the governance of Gaza anymore. And Hamas is aware of them being completely undermined, and they have a real crisis handling civil affairs inside the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian people's blood is being shed every day. Tens of thousands are killed and missing and injured. And the Palestinian people need to put an end for this, and Hamas needs to deal in untraditional way because they have no more cards, not the detainees or the military depletion. There is new de facto, and the mediators must play a very good role to push for the day following the war and to stop this war. Of course, Israel now are setting their conditions terms because they are moving from a very strong place with military accomplishments achieved along the past 2 years.
And you mentioned there Arab countries getting involved to get rid of arms in Gaza. How might Arab countries get involved in this activity and perhaps convince Hamas that they need not to be involved in any future Gaza?
We would go back to what happened before, that the Egyptian side, in the framework of the Egyptian initiative for the second day, for Hamas to give up the governance of Gaza and to form a committee to rule Gaza. This initiative was approved by the Hamas movement and the Palestinian factions. And of course, we can build upon this initiative to break the current dilemma and to reach a sustainable ceasefire agreement and to start the day next to the war. There are other Arab states that completely reject the Hamas existence or being armed. For Hamas, being armed is a guarantee for existence, and they do not want to give it up. Of course, the same goes for all Palestinian factions. So there must be a proposition for UN forces or Arab forces to intervene and handle the next phase. The Lebanese example here is a very good example that can be followed. The UNIFIL is working, there is border supervision, and the truce could hold in spite of all the Israeli violations, launching strikes against Hezbollah. Same example can be taken into Gaza if there is true political determination to apply this example. But unfortunately, it's not the case. There is no real determination for this, and they are working to change the architecture of the region. And if there is no real pressure by the United States or the mediators, there will be no ceasefire in the near future, and we will have to wait another period and maybe for the end of this year.
Well, thank you very much, Ahmed Sultan, a researcher into regional security and terrorism. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Now, US President Donald Trump says it could soon be clear if Hamas will accept a final Gaza ceasefire proposal. He said today it would likely be known within 24 hours whether Hamas had agreed to what he described as a final proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. According to officials, the plan involves a staggered release of 10 living Israeli detainees and the return of 18 bodies in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Of the 50 remaining hostages in Gaza, 20 are believed to still be alive. Under the proposal, humanitarian aid would enter Gaza immediately, while Israel would begin a phased military withdrawal from parts of the enclave. Talks on a permanent ceasefire would also start straight away. Hamas is currently considering the proposal for the 60-day ceasefire with Israel amid the ongoing conflict, which has lasted nearly 2 years and caused extensive casualties and destruction. According to reporting in the New York Times, the central issue is whether Hamas trusts that this temporary truce could lead to a permanent resolution. Hamas demands that any ceasefire must pave the way for a complete and lasting end to hostilities, while Netanyahu insists on a temporary halt only until Hamas's military capabilities and governance are dismantled. A response from Hamas is expected imminently, but even if expected, further negotiations will be needed to finalize the ceasefire terms before implementation. Now, joining the discussion is Mohammed Wezin, who is an Israeli affairs specialist. Thank you very much for joining us on the phone. A poll published last week found that around 67% of Israeli respondents favor ending the Gaza war and approving a detainee for prisoners deal. Is this likely to have any effect on the government, the Knesset, or even the war cabinet?
Good afternoon to you and all the viewers. Recently, there has been a change inside the Israeli public opinion regarding ending the war on the Gaza Strip after 20 months of the fight. The public opinion has changed after several protests took place, objecting and opposing the Israeli government politics led by Benjamin Netanyahu, including Edmar Ben-Gvir, who is seeking in all ways possible not to end the war and to hinder any deal. The Israeli people want to end this war and to bring back the detainees because they see that there has been a lot of articles published in the Israeli media saying that Israel is in a vicious cycle of war, and this has been transferred to the military institution, which is now also pushing for ending the war, which was expressed by the chief of staff Zamir, and it was also expressed by more than one military official inside the Israeli army, as they need to sign this deal as soon as possible. Several writers also in several Israeli outlets expressed their desire for the Israeli government to accept a deal for the exchange of detainees and to bring back the rest of the detainees from the Gaza Strip, as the scene is full of complications that are saying that this war did not pay its fruits, and there is a golden opportunity with the pressure of President Donald Trump to have the deal signed in this specific timing. The Israeli public is now requesting to meet with the President of the United States and to pressure the Israeli government to accept the deal. And it is no longer up to Netanyahu political trends and his government, who strongly tend to continue the war, including Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and they are aware that ending the war will bring them several challenges with the Israeli public itself, because if they are not in a state of war, they will see the shortcomings inside the Israeli society and the trial file will be reopened. And that's why we see that Netanyahu wants a deal with a safe exit, according to several leaks that he demanded Trump to pressure him to end the war and provide a safe exit without being exposed to trial.
Okay, well, let me just interrupt there, because I want to talk about Netanyahu's trip to Washington. He's going there to discuss items with the president, whereas back home, several Likud ministers are simultaneously urging rapid annexation of parts of the West Bank before the summer recess. What will Netanyahu make of this, and what will Trump make of this? It does seem that Trump has had no problem in the past with new settlements by Israel.
Of course, the idea of annexing more lands from the West Bank has been ongoing under the concept of Israeli settlement with all of its forms. And when Smotrich took office as Minister of Finance and he took the file of settlements in the West Bank, he built a lot of settlements, and he's working to expand and annex more lands. The file of the West Bank, we can call it the forgotten issue in the framework of the Gaza war, and with the Gaza war and the 12-day war with Iran, the Israeli policy expanded further and further to take more land from the West Bank. And that's why the idea of annexing the West Bank and minimizing its area to be completely controlled by the Israeli government by expanding and building more settlements. Now, the West Bank file, when it's proposed in the Netanyahu-Trump meeting scheduled for next Monday, I think there will be a lot of discussions in this regard, but we cannot say for sure what's it's going to lead to. But the de facto says that the West Bank has been already downsized, and there has been a lot of erosion to the Palestinian lands, which makes the idea of the complete identity of the Palestinian occupied lands completely threatened under the control of the occupation, whether in Gaza or the West Bank. What I see is that Netanyahu's government, including Smotrich and Ben Gvir, wants in any way possible kill the idea of the Palestinian questions with all of its findings, and destroying the Gaza Strip on one side and expanding in the West Bank on the other side are attempts to expand the Israeli area. 7,000 residential units in the occupied Golan, which stresses that the settlement policy is going forward, and Israel never gave up the idea of taking more lands and eliminating the Palestinian identity. There must be a regional stance and an international stance against it. If Trump and Netanyahu want really to end the conflicts and end all wars, and what we call neutralization of the region of all problems, the U.S. president must push against the settlements.
Yes, of course. And I just wanted to bring to cut in there. You mentioned Ben Gvir and Smotrich quite a few times. It's been reported that they're joining forces to try and end any emerging deal. If they do try and sabotage the ceasefire agreement or any detained deal, how might they go about that? And could the fact that they're against the ceasefire and also going against Netanyahu potentially, could that bring the coalition down?
As you have indicated, Smotrich and Ben Gvir were united for the first time in 2 years, which is announced by the Israeli media that Ben Gvir and Smotrich invited each other to meet to take this deal down. And the procedures to achieve or implement this scheme, I think it will go back to what happened today in the Gaza Strip. Israel lost 3 soldiers in different checkpoints in Qnews, and Netanyahu will be pressured by Smotrich and Ben Gvir to respond and to take the oppressive fake scene to Donald Trump that Hamas is still there, the resistance is still there, and Hamas is still defending its grounds, killing more Israeli soldiers as portrayed in the Hebrew media with all of its means and outlets. So these Smotrich and Ben Gvir procedures are threats to withdraw from the Zionist government, and without them, the Netanyahu coalition will be very fragile and will lead eventually to the fall of the Israeli government. And if the Knesset is dissolved, this will lead to the declining popularity of Netanyahu, especially also after the Iranian war and his failure in the detainees file. He will be eventually taken down. So the tools now at the hands of Smotrich and Ben Gvir is to threat to withdraw from the Israeli government and to try to convince the far-right parties such as Stash and the government to try and dismantle the government. And Netanyahu, his meeting with Trump, will tackle this point, and this meeting will mark a change in the future of this file altogether, as Trump announced that he will affirm the deal next Monday. There is a very important indicator that took place today, that how fast the military Israeli monitoring announced the killing of the 3 soldiers today in the Gaza Strip. the censorship was never that fast to announce the identities of killed soldiers in the strip, which is a pressuring card.
Okay, we're going to have to cut you off there because we're just out of time. But thank you very much, Mohammed Wezen, who is an Israeli affairs specialist. Thank you very much for being here with us on Q News. And that brings us to the end of our special coverage for today on the situation. Until next time, stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.